Thank you, Professor Chandarajan. I left my government baggage almost about 20 years ago. And if I might put it this way, I'm on the last mile of the economy and last mile of the energy system because I work with slums, I work with remote tribal areas, and I work with economically weaker sections. So I look at the energy transition from below. I am not really terribly excited about minimizing carbon footprint, but definitely I'm worried about the poverty footprint of the energy system. Now, when you look at migrant workers, recently the crisis, they're energy producers. They're very small energy consumers. Similarly, construction workers. Now, India's energy problem probably is this last mile problem. The energy planners in this country, there is inadequate emphasis on addressing energy deprivation of the low income households, and the focus is more on energy sufficiency for higher income groups. Now, look at India. They're talking of 100% electrification, 100% household electrification, and whatnot. Still, according to official figures, about 24 million households are energy deprived. They have no electricity today. Most of them, they are concentrated in Bihar, UP, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan. And this is the size half of South Africa and roughly the size of Italy. And these are the people who have not tasted the benefits of energy. There are reasons for that, very good reasons for that. The first, I think the most important reason is the cost barrier. Now, if you look at the low income households, they use end use devices like stoves and lamps and all of very high inefficiencies. Lamps. And the result is, if you look at per capita useful energy availability, there is a difference between gross energy and useful energy because in between lies the end use efficiency. Because their end use efficiencies are so low, the per capita useful energy availability of these households is very, very low. And surprisingly, the unit cost of useful energy in India is very high because of end use energy inefficiencies. So, this is something very important. The poor get energy at a much higher cost because of their inefficient end use devices. Now, in my view, energy planning, which really should address these households, should go hand in hand with livelihood planning, which is missing in this country very, very clearly. And the livelihood planning is always done in isolation. Energy planning is done in isolation. They don't converge. Now, for example, COVID. Today's pandemic. I work in the slums. Now, if you look at their problem, their livelihoods are suddenly removed. Their incomes have collapsed. Whatever subsidized electricity, subsidized liquefied petroleum gas they get, even that they're unable to pay because the recurring charges they cannot, their incomes do not permit. And strictly speaking, if there is a financial stimulus which is required in this country, that is there. They need that financial stimulus. But unfortunately, the finance minister, the prime minister, they don't talk about this at all because they are not aware of this problem, in my view, and they're not properly advised. And today, only the corporates and the banks who lend huge loans to these corporates who are heavily indebted, they're the people who get this financial stimulus. Now, as long as there is energy deprivation among low income households, the energy problem continues to be very acute in this country. We have not solved it. Now, coming to the Punjab farmers, they were opposing the electricity bill, the new bill, the privatization bill. See, what is the purpose of this privatization bill? They want to privatize discoms, the distribution companies. Now, you must know the discoms are the companies which cross subsidize They charge a little more from industry and all, and they use that money, revenue, for cross-subsidizing the low-income households, remote areas, tribal areas, hilly areas. Now, as a result of privatization, the capacity of the distribution companies to cross-subsidize is completely diluted. So the result is the impact of this new electricity privatization bill really will be felt by the low income households in this country. It removes the cross subsidy. Now, another interesting thing is, who are these bidders for these discom, the distribution companies? See, they're all the age-old big corporate houses. They have already taken huge loans from the banks. They're NPAs. Many of them are NPAs. They're heavily indebted. Even if they are not declared as NPAs, they are virtually NPAs because they are all greened. There is no greening of energy, but greening of our corporates. If they can't pay, the banks go and give them money. One big corporate house today is by getting 5,000 crores from State Bank of India. How can you explain that? No, these are the people, when they take over these discoms, these distribution companies, they'll create more NPAs and they strain the banking system. And probably they let down the consumers in the long run. If it happened in Orissa, the private distribution companies let down the consumers there. Unfortunately, the government does not learn lessons from these particular case studies. Now, coming to the other aspect of energy planning, there is very little focus on energy demand management, efficiency improvements. And the emphasis is more supply oriented. Increase capacity, coal-based electricity capacity, increase gas imports, increase gas production, that kind of thing. Now, a megawatt, in electricity generation, a megawatt is the unit of power generation. Now, any day, a negawatt, negawatt is a megawatt saved by demand management, savings, that is a negawatt. And a new megawatt, you compare, a megawatt is almost about half or even less the cost of a new megawatt. That means, strictly speaking, we should be really investing heavily on these megawatts, and we're not doing that. And, when I talk of megawatts, you take a city like Madras or a city like Delhi, the major load contribution is from air conditioners. In Delhi, it is coolers. And that is where really you require, energy efficiency improvements. Similarly, industrial motors, agricultural pump sets. These are the ones, fans, induction loads, mainly induction loads. And that is where it should be done. And nobody talks about it. Today, when you talk of energy, very fancy names, but you don't find much. In fact, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, that act was actually piloted during my time when I was Secretary of Power in Government of India. Today, it is entirely a low-key institution. It has no existence. It should be the most aggressive institution today in the energy sector. The PCRA, Petroleum Conservation Research Association, these are the ones. Now, coming back to the supply orientation is very, very distressing. I feel very distressed. The country has embarked on auctioning 38 coal blocks. That means India's future, energy future, is being locked into 200 million tons per year for about 30 years. Against, the whole climate debate today probably runs counter to India's commitments at the global level. Now, look at, we had another webinar on coal block auctions. I mean, it's extraordinarily distressing. If you know something about the power system, today, the thermal hydro mix, thermal proportion is very high. There's an imbalance in the generation mix. And today, the thermal power plants, mostly coal-based, they're operating at almost about 50% plant load factor capacity utilization because there's no demand. It's not as though the demand is not there. It is the off peak. They work during the entire day and night thermal power plant. There is no demand during off peak hours. So if you add more coal-based generation to the system, you are increasing the cost because the power purchase agreements have a deemed generation clause, and the entire burden falls on the consumer. So the more coal capacity you add, the more cost you impose on the consumer. Then, coming back to these 38 coal blocks, 8 coal blocks are in dense forest areas. They call them no-go forest areas. If you value the bioresources and the biodiversity of those blocks, it is enormous. It will be much more than what you gain from this power. I mean, nobody does this social cost, social benefit analysis anywhere. Then coming to the same coal, these 38 coal blocks, we looked at them and the river catchments. Most of these coal mining will take place Hasdev, Anand River. It goes into Mahanadi River. And it pollutes. It reduces the water inflows. That means you are actually hitting at the root of our river system in India. And nobody questions this. It's a criminal act. We are destroying what nature has given us. Then the most important thing, as a person, I work with tribal areas. Many of these coal blocks, actually parts of that, they have been declared as scheduled areas under the fifth schedule of the Constitution. The tribals have special rights. There is a Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act, PISA Act. There is a Forest Rights Act, and they've got constitutional rights. And these people have not consulted. Under the PISA Act, the Grama Sabha has caused sovereignty. It's a remarkable legislation. Nobody has ever consulted the Gram Sabhas. They have violated these legislations. They've infringed. It's a human rights violation. It's a constitutional violation. We have pointed this out to the powers that be, but there is no response. And finally, who are these people who are going to bid for the coal blocks? I had a look at them. Again, they are the corporates. We have already crippled the banking system in India. They are the main NPS. And we are handing over very valuable coal resources to them, depletable resources, and they'll create more NPS. So in a way, it actually, from the energy finance point of view, you're going to cripple the economy, and you're also probably going to add carbon imprint, and of course, as usual, I said, poverty footprint to the system. Now, nuclear. We got a nuclear power plant coming up in my neighborhood, Kovada. It's a very strange thing. Westinghouse company, American company, is supposed to supply 6 or 7 huge reactors. Westinghouse has gone bankrupt. And why are we setting up this power plant here? Because we want to create employment in the United States. It doesn't give any benefits here, local people. It's a lush green, fertile area, Kovada, on the coast. And they're displacing people, and they're destroying agriculture. And this nuclear power plant, is not safe. I'm a nuclear physicist by profession. And I can tell you, there is around the power plant site, there is an exclusion zone. That's about 5 kilometers. Displacement is beyond that. And we have seen Fukushima, what happened there. And unfortunately in India, the regulator, the nuclear regulator, Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, is not independent enough. They work under the control of the Department of Atomic Energy, which works under the aegis of the Prime Minister. It is his subject. Now, as soon as Fukushima accident took place, 2012, the Department of Atomic Energy, they shed crocodile tears, and they introduced one bill, a more independent regulator. The parliament looked at it, and the parliament made some far-reaching recommendations saying, no, this is not enough. You have to make it more independent. And after about 2-3 years, public memory is short. Slowly they dumped it. No, you don't hear it at all about this new nuclear regulatory authority bill. And all the reforms in this country during UPA and the present NDA, they talk of all kinds of reforms, but International Atomic Energy Agency has recommended this independence of a regulator. So we are actually expanding our nuclear field. We are adding the nuclear capacity through imported reactors, imported fuel will be literally, becoming a captive kind of a thing to foreign countries. And there is no independent regulation. That means, there is a potential risk. We are exposing the people of this country to potential risk. Very strangely, the Kovada nuclear reactors were supposed to be set up in Gujarat. There the people objected. And it came here. And I keep telling people, what is nobody insures a nuclear power plant. World Bank never gave any loan. They know that it's not a good investment. So in a way, the nuclear thing is a very, very worrisome thing. And we have been questioning this. There is another power plant coming up in Andhra, and I'm involved in this activism. Then coming to solar, it is again worrisome. Solar, good. It's a wonderful thing, sun energy and all that. But one would have expected it to be more democratic, more decentralized. Rooftop electricity, agriculture, solar agricultural irrigation pump sets. But what are we doing? We are captured by the corporates. We have got huge centralized solar power plants. And who are the bidders? Our old friends, corporates who have taken heavy loans from the banks, so already crippled the banking system, they are again coming here. You know what they're doing? They are bidding cutthroat tariffs, 2 rupees, 2.5 rupees, cutthroat tariff. They know that they don't have to repay any loan in India because, the government has been extraordinarily kind to them, very hospitable them. And many of them fund the political parties. I filed a case in the Delhi High Court against foreign contributions being received by the two major national political parties. I won the case. I went right up to Supreme Court. I won the case. But what did the government do? The present India government? They amended the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act with retrospective effect. This is the kind of politics of this country. I think one should really question this. Now, this solar thing, unfortunately, nobody thinks of solar photovoltaic waste. How do you recycle that? Have you thought of, is there a policy in place? No. We are only adding new megawatts, solar megawatts, but nobody is ever bothered about how we are going to deal with the waste. We are not concerned with that. See, nature has got a wonderful system. In nature, every waste is a raw material. It recycles beautifully. Whereas this, as Vandanaji has said, this is something which is totally mechanized, the kind of pollution that it generates, and nobody is bothered about it. So in a way, the entire energy transition system in India, as I see it from below, from the tribal point of view, from the slum point of view, is literally driven by corporate interests. All policies, whether you take DISCOM privatization, coal block auctions, solar, everywhere you find this corporate footprint, not so much carbon, but corporate footprint. So India probably, I think we'll have to worry about this. And I can tell you from the energy finance point of view, in the next 5-6 years, the banks are going to be further burdened with NPAs by these great corporate players who are supposed to save this country. And we are going to have a system where end-use inefficiencies will continue. The unit cost of energy to the poor is going to be very, very high. And per capita energy availability to the poor is going to be very low. Energy deprivation will continue. I think this is a time when each one of us, I think, should question the whole trend, that is taking place. I, as a person who has been associated with energy planning for a long time, I feel very worried. I am about 80 years old. So I think young people who are present today among the participants, it's your future. It is not only energy future, it is economy future, social future. I think you should worry about it. So please, mull over these issues, which are extremely important. They're long-term issues, they're not short-term issues. And they're going to have a very, very big impact on the way energy trajectory is going to take shape and the way economy is going to take shape. Thank you very much.